Hi, I'm Karima Brown. It's Sunday morning and it's time for The Fix.
First up, in the hot seat is Deputy Justice Minister John Jeffries, as we take stock at the progress made in restoring faith and credibility in the criminal justice system. This as law enforcement agencies crack down on corruption and gender-based violence. But are these efforts enough, and will they lead to a recalibration of institutional capacity of a broken system? Then we turn our attention to state-owned entities, all of which are facing serious financial and labour challenges. The department's acting Director General shares the state's plan for how to turn many of these bankrupt institutions around. And as is custom, we take a look at what's made headlines in the weekend newspapers and why. The Fix starts now.
Welcome to this edition of The Fix, where every Sunday we hold the decision makers to account. We tell you why it matters, how it affects you, and why you should care. So as the dragnet of the Hawks is said to widen following the arrests of a senior ANC member as well as government officials, the focus must turn to the resourcing and the rebuilding of the entire criminal justice system, which was of course hollowed out and often impeded the course of justice. And while progress has been made following the arrest of Mr. Bongo, who of course was the former State Security Minister, one must ask if this is really enough. More so, where is the money going to come, and the dearth in capacity that continues to beset these institutions? Joining me now to discuss the criminal justice system and its recalibration is Deputy Justice Minister Mr. John Jeffries. Deputy Minister, good morning. Welcome to The Fix. And of course, congratulations on the steps that have been taken, both in terms of dealing with corruption as well as the President's letter, which refers to quite an elaborate plan to deal with gender-based violence. But the big question, of course, is the question of money and resources. Before we come to the question of gender-based violence, we spent some time with the National Prosecuting Authority head and the head of the Special Investigative Unit, Herminie Cronje, and they spoke to us about the fact that they are making progress, but they're dealing with a resource capacity issue, and they're also dealing with a budgetary constraint. Take us through what monies has been made available for the Special Investigative Unit and how it will assist in them being able to do their jobs.
Okay, morning, and thanks for having me on the show. I think, Karina, you mean the Investigating Directorate. The Special Investigating Unit is something else. That's a body that does civil investigations of mainly corruption within government. So that's separate from the NPA entirely. But basically, as you know, we are faced with a lot of financial constraints. However, money has to be found, and money is being found. I don't have the rands and cents, but it largely has to come from reprioritizing our budget. We're also looking at other funds. So, for example, the CARA account, Civil Asset Recovery account, which is basically money that is seized from people involved in corruption, goes into that account. Some of that money can be used to assist law enforcement agencies. And it's not just the NPA, it's also the prosecutors can't do anything without having the evidence, and that evidence has to be collected by the police, and primarily it's the Hawks. So they also need to be capacitated. You've seen things like the NPA had wanted certain private advocates to assist them, not in prosecuting but in giving legal advice. So that's an example of increasing the capacitation. But the bottom line is we've basically got to be as cost effective as possible.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very clear that there are huge constraints on the public purse, and you've got to work with what you have. So let's take, for example, the fact that you've made some very senior advocates available to, these enforcement agencies. But you've also gotten criticism. Most of them are men. A lot of female advocates have asked why weren't they seconded. How do you respond to that? And is that hindering the ability of these agencies process to actually make use of the services that people put, at their disposal?
Look, obviously, we've got to. We come from a white country, white government. We've got to male-dominated, white male rather. We've got to transform. We've got to have a country that reflects the race and gender demographics of South Africa. For a variety of reasons. But it's very important for the justice system that people see people like them on the bench, prosecuting, whatever. On that particular case, look, it was senior advocates, silks. And the problem is the number of African women silks is very, very small, and I think none of them were available. The NPA are also going to be making use of junior advocates or ordinary advocates, and most of those will be, in fact, women. In
fact, the point that you're making about the fact that female silks are so rare, particularly if we look at African women, a lot of them are actually at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry.
Exactly.
We've seen them as evidence leaders. What is the relationship between the resource sharing? So can Ms. Cronje, for example, go and poach evidence leaders at the Commission, or will they be available once the Commission has wrapped up their work?
Look, I can't really speak for any of the actors there. The evidence leaders are private advocates, so it's in terms of their contractual relationship with the Zondo Commission, how long they've got it for, those kinds of things. So it's really between them and the Commission, and them and other people wanting them to do work as to whether they're available to do it.
Now, the big question with justice in South Africa also is that it comes off the back of a period where many people believe that politicians and senior government officials acted with impunity, and people feel that the wheels are turning too slowly and that we're not getting to the big cases. Let's just take a listen to the Special Investigative Unit that is looking at the big corruption cases, Advocate Hermione Cronje addressing the media on some of the challenges and some of the cases that they're dealing with. I want to just come back to why it's important for justice also to be seen to be done. Just let's take a listen quickly.
The CAS number on Ndluli, it's CAS 15507 of 2011. That will give you an idea of how long we've been trying to get these the information declassified. I do think that people should know that you're not going to be able to hide around behind something like declassification to get away with what you've been up to. And there's a lot of that going on.
Now, that is, of course, Advocate Cronje speaking about the Ndluli case. And now, I was at that briefing, Deputy Minister, and one of the issues there that she was actually quite, forceful in raising was that there isn't necessarily, whilst there's good cooperation at a national level, a lot of these institutions have been weakened at provincial level as well, and a lot of the infrastructure that impeded justice is actually still in place. So she was talking about the question of declassification, for example, and she said initially she had tried a cooperative approach with her colleagues in other law enforcement agencies, and then she realized that it's not working and that perhaps she should even consider subpoenaing them. We know now that the declassification of certain documents is what is enabling this directorate to actually be able to move forward on the Ndluli case. Before you answer the question about the cooperation and justice being seen to be done, another case that might bring hope to people who are wondering about where we are with investigations is, of course, the Estina Dairy matter. Let's just take a listen to what she had to say about this.
We've gotten a private forensic firm in to properly analyze the flows of funds. And so there are two aspects there. There's how the Bank of Baroda operated and the unique arrangements within the bank. But then we basically have all the bank statements now where funds flowed and have been able to put together a complete picture. We, as you know from the court's hearing, The matter was withdrawn because we were awaiting bank statements, in particular from the UAE. We have addressed that problem. So I'm told by the forensic investigators that we'll have a final report at the end of the month, and then the matter is ready to be re-enrolled.
Ready to begin. I mean, that is a very positive note. But she was sketching a picture on two cases that have dragged on for a long time. The one is the Mdluli matter, which is now back on the roll. She gave us the case number at that press briefing. And the Estina matter is a classic case where the matter was rushed and the NPA didn't have it stuck in a row and had to kind of, you know, turn around, tail between its legs. She's now suggesting that they've actually done their homework. But this gets to the public perception around how fast justice works. And you know justice is important to be seen to be done.
Yeah.
Perception is as powerful as anything. How does a constrained justice department, a constrained NPA, deal with these intractable problems whilst also you know, dealing with the public expectation that we need to move faster and more efficiently on these cases?
Look, I'd say I'd answer it from a number of perspectives. I think one is that I'm sure there can always be improvements made to the more effective use of resources and proceeding faster. However, having said that, we've had problems in the past, like Estina, where the NPA issue arrest warrants, people get arrested, get charged, and then the cases have to be withdrawn. And that is extremely bad for public perceptions. It's not fair on the individuals who've been charged, so we don't want that to be happening. These cases, as I understand it, are complicated. And so they need to be given, there have been, I mean, there's quite an outcry from the public. There have been some rather rude, I think, cartoons in some of the newspapers relating to the slow pace of the prosecutions. But I think that the NPA need to be given the space to collect all the evidence. You know, definitely politicians should not be interfering in investigations and in decisions around who is going to be prosecuted. But equally then the public, you don't want the public to be pushing the politicians to pressurize the NPA to proceed faster, and then it comes to court and there's a big mess up because all the ducks have not been put in a row. So it's that kind of balancing aspect. What I would really be urging is for patience, let them do their job.
Okay, let's shift focus away from corruption now and speak about the question of gender-based violence. The President issues a letter every Monday morning, and this Monday past he spoke of the fact that government has now got a complete rollout plan to deal with gender-based violence. You've targeted and reprioritized 1.6 billion rand. Tell me how that 1.6 billion is going to be used, and more specifically, how the things that gender-based organizations have been complaining about, the lack of rape kits, the lack of proper facilities for women who bring these cases, how the money is going to be used to actually, you know, deal with those challenges.
Yeah. Look, again, let me speak mainly about justice-related issues. I can't say so much for the courts. But generally speaking with this program, I mean, what's important with this program is that it's coordination at the highest level. Often you can have silo mentalities between departments, between the police and the prosecution, etc., and health as far as collecting forensic evidence, which doesn't help the prosecution of cases. So there's high-level coordination taking place, which is extremely important. From Justice's side, we're looking at, sorry, just before that, part of the program then is an emergency program over 100 days, with a number of different interventions. So, for example, one of the aspects targeted is trying to get rid of the backlog on DNA testing in the laboratories, which is holding up a lot of cases and the finalization of a lot of investigations. How are we doing with that? Well, that's the target. That's more from the police's side and health side. I hope they are proceeding. From Justice's side, it's a focus on continuing the rollout of sexual offences courts and of Thuthuzela care centres, with 3 more Thuthuzela care centres going to be established soon. But it's also It's also monitoring the existing facilities to see that they are working effectively.
Now, the President said that we remain firm in our resolve that life sentences must mean life. Those who commit crimes against women and children must know that they will be caught and tried, and that our courts will firmly act against those found guilty. Now, we had a recent case where this sentiment was completely ignored. How does that happen, Deputy Minister? How does the decision taken at the highest level of government across departments not filter down to the courts where these cases are being heard?
Yeah, the difficulty is that justice is dispensed by human beings, and human beings are fallible. And in that case that was in the media last weekend, there were 4 cases from this magistrate that were sent on review. They were picked up because of complaints from the public. They were sent on review to the High Court. The High Court ruled, I think it was in September, that the sentences were extremely inappropriate and the people must be resentenced. They'd been found guilty, but they'd been given lenient sentences for quite horrific child rapes. So 2 have already been resentenced. One who had been allowed to just walk free got a 20-year sentence. The other got a life imprisonment sentence.
But what's happening to the magistrate who's clearly failed in the duty to execute justice?
Well, look, I can't jump to that conclusion. Remember that magistrates are judicial officers, they're independent. And you, and I'm sure most of the public generally, would not want people, politicians, ministers, deputy ministers, interfering. So basically, complaints against judicial officers in the case of judges have to go to the Judicial Services Commission. In the case of magistrates, the Magistrates Commission.
Has this matter
and this
taken
matter
there?
has been taken to the Magistrates Commission. They have an ethics committee which is investigating, and they will hopefully be coming to a resolution of how to deal with the matter.
One of the things that impressed me about the President's letter is that he's saying he's getting weekly updates from you guys on this intervention. So it means that he's very hands-on. Everyone is very hands-on. So what does the weekly briefings deal with? Do they deal with whether you've managed to get, let's say, the DNA testing done, whether the rape kits are actually at the police stations, whether magistrates are actually doing their jobs as they're supposed to do? What does a report back to the President on this intervention sound and look like?
Basically, they've stressed it is a report back on things that have been done. They don't want to hear plans. So it must be what has happened. And it's basically progress from each department on the different sections that they are meant to be attending to. So one of the areas we're also looking at is reviewing legislation. And so they want to have reports about how far...
So what are you going to tell the President tomorrow? Tomorrow's Monday.
Well, the report is already in. It's from officials, so that is already in, but it's
basically... Give us
basically...
a sneak idea of what's going to come.
I should have reread the report before I came in, but it basically would be, I mean, there's the 16 Days of Activism campaign coming up starting on Monday. That's an international campaign, as you'd know. It would be on what are the programs for that campaign, how far are we going with legislation to tighten up bail laws, sentencing. Maybe just going back to the sentencing issue, one of the reasons that we brought in minimum sentences after the establishment of democracy was that judges were giving and magistrates were giving lenient sentences for rape. So it was the legislature saying to the judiciary, this kind of case is very important, and you have to then give a minimum sentence of life, of 20 years, of whatever. And unfortunately, or well, not necessarily unfortunately, but we can't constrain the judges, the judiciary entirely. So they have a way out of if there are substantial and compelling reasons not to follow the sentence. But the whole reason for the minimum sentences dispensation was because of the fallibility of the judges and the magistrates at that stage. They were more male. So you would have had magistrates and judges thinking that, oh, well, this woman who was raped asked for it because of the way she was dressed, and that obviously is completely unacceptable.
All right, Deputy Minister, thank you so much for coming to the program. We will hopefully, after this intervention, speak to you and see whether progress has really been made. And it's good to know that every Monday morning the President gets a what's been done list rather than a what's been planned list in terms of these issues. John Jeffries, thank you so very much. Still ahead, government's plans to turn SOEs around.